In this video, we're going to look at some simple angle pairs. And you might not know what I mean by simple just now. It doesn't necessarily mean easy or hard. It just means pairs of angles that are coming off of the same vertex. So I can see like three, maybe you could argue for more angles all coming off of this same vertex right here. I have an angle here, angle here, angle here. You could talk about the reflex angles as well, but this is what we're going to be talking about, is doing some calculations on these. So here's our first one, and I see that I want to find the value of x in the diagram below. I see the x, and you may be able to think through what this is, but we're going to break down exactly why these work out the way they do. So this is one of our angle pairs. We're going to look at three today. The first one is called vertical angles. And for vertical angles, these are angles formed by two intersecting lines opposite each other. This opposite each other is not a great way to describe it, but it should get the idea across, where if I have two intersecting lines like this, if I look at angle A here, angle B here, these are not vertical angles. These are not the way that vertical angles work. The vertical angles we're looking at would be if I had this angle here and this angle here. So they are sort of across. They're not adjacent, but they're sort of across from each other here. And the rule, as you can sort of see in the diagram a little bit, is that vertical angles are congruent, meaning they have the same measure. So in this case, I could just write A equals B. Our second angle pair is called a linear pair. So in this one, a linear pair is two adjacent angles that, when combined, form a straight angle or a line. So what this looks like in a very general sense is if I have a straight angle split into two angles here and here, this angle A, this angle B, these are a linear pair. Now, it can look like this, or it can actually look like that. So don't be confused if you see a diagram of two crossing lines. You might still have a different rule. This is still a linear pair. This is not vertical angles. But for this, you might recall that a straight angle has measured 180 degrees. So in this diagram, you would have A plus B equals 180 degrees. Now, I'm not going to give a specific problems of this other type, but you could have another term called supplementary angles. And that is just two angles whose measures add to 180 degrees. So in a linear pair, they actually have to make the line. Supplementary angles, I could have something like this, where I have, let's say, 130 degrees and 50 degrees. So you can see they don't actually, there's no straight line made in this diagram, but if I put these together, it would still make a straight line. So that's the difference. The final rule is complementary angles, and this is two angles whose measures add to 90 degrees. So I could tell you angles are complementary, or I could give you something like this. If I give you some intersecting angles, now of course we have a linear pair right there. If I tell you that this angle here is 90 degrees, that also means that all of these, this angle, and this angle are 90 degrees, but I could split this side into two different angles. And now, since I know from this angle right here that that is 90 degrees, that tells me that these angles here add to 90 degrees. That's what complementary angles do. So I would have A plus B equals 90 degrees. So let's see a couple practice problems. The toughest thing about all of these is just figuring out how to set up the problem. The algebra to solve them will always be pretty easy. So here's our first one. Find the value of x in the diagram below. What I notice is this. I notice that I have a right angle. That also means that right next to us, we have a right angle, which means that x plus 47, I'll drop the degrees for now, bring them back at the end, equals 90. I'll subtract the 47 degrees from both sides, and I end up with x equals 43 degrees. Now, you might not like that method or might have seen a different thing. You could have alternately noticed that I have a straight angle made up of 1, 2, 3 angles. And I could also have done x plus 47 plus 90 equals 180. 47 plus 90 is 137, so x plus 137 equals 180, and I could subtract 137 from both sides. And that would give me, again, x is equal to 43 degrees. Okay, this one, so I notice these two, I have the crossing lines. Now these angles are sort of on opposite sides of this, so that means these are vertical angles. And for vertical angles, I know they're congruent. So x equals 105 degrees, and we're all done. For this one, I notice that I have two angles next to each other, and they make a straight line. Now, keep in mind, even if I had this case here, we would not have vertical angles still. This would still be a linear pair. So to solve this, it's a linear pair. Two angles make a line. X plus 80 equals 180. Subtract the 80, and I get x is equal to 100 degrees. Okay, I hope that made sense. In the description down below, there will be a link to some worked examples so you can see a few more, especially working through how to set up the problems. It can be quite common for students to mistakenly set them up where set them equal to 90, 180 are equal to each other, mess that up a little bit. But then seeing the algebra as well. And there will also be a link to a worksheet so you can get some practice with this.